Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before starting the video, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button and give this video a like up. Star Trek: Strange New Worlds gradually makes it clear that James T. Kirk puts himself at a disadvantage when he becomes captain of the USS Enterprise. With Star Trek: Strange New Worlds Season 3 ended, the prequel series is past the halfway mark of its 5-year mission to lead into Star Trek: the original series. Captain Christopher Pike is firmly Star Trek: Strange New Worlds' leading man, but the prequel introduced his successor, Lieutenant James T. Kirk, at the end of Star Trek: Strange New Worlds Season 1, a recurring special guest star. Kirk's progression towards his destiny as captain of the Enterprise is being seeded continuously. Star Trek: Strange New Worlds Season 3, Episode 6, The Zealot Who Ate Its Tail, canonically gave Lieutenant Commander James T. Kirk his first taste of starship command. Aboard the USS Farragut, acting Captain Kirk led a successful rescue of the Starship Enterprise with the help of Lieutenant Spock, Scotty, Ensign Nyota Uhura, and Nurse Christine Chapel. It's by Star Trek: Strange New Worlds design that Kirk's first time as captain of a starship happened alongside members of his future USS Enterprise crew. But when Kirk does become captain in Star Trek: the original series, he does so as something of an outsider. Spock, Lieutenant Uhura, Scotty, and Nurse Christine Chapel all remain aboard when Captain James T. Kirk takes command of the USS Enterprise. While Kirk knows and has worked with each of them, they all know each other far better. By the time the Starship Enterprise becomes Captain Kirk's in 2265, Spock, Chapel, and Uhura will have worked together for 6 years under Captain Pike, with Scotty having about 4 years on the Enterprise by then. They all shared many voyages and adventures together and survived battles with the Gorn, among other enemies. Lieutenant Commander Kirk's visits to the USS Enterprise are remarkably frequent relative to his role as first officer of the USS Farragut. Yet his time working together with his future crewmates remains limited. By virtue of Kirk's mind meld with Spock in Star Trek: Strange New Worlds Season 3's finale, Jim knows the Vulcan science officer best. Kirk worked with Scotty a second time and came to like the Scottish engineer in Star Trek: Strange New Worlds Season 3, Episode 8, 4.5 Vulcans. Given their history, it makes sense that Kirk was pleased that Spock, Scotty, Chapel, and Uhura remained aboard his USS Enterprise. But James' time with them is still fleeting compared to how well they all know each other. Watching Captain Kirk in Star Trek: the original series, it's notable that Jim keeps a professional distance from most of his USS Enterprise crew, especially compared to Captain Pike. Kirk never hosts family-style get-togethers or makes the effort to get to know most of his crew both personally and socially the way Pike did. This isn't to say Captain Kirk isn't caring or approachable, but Jim kept a separation between himself and most of his Enterprise crew. The exceptions were Spock and Dr. Leonard Bones M.C. Coity Forrest Kelly, who became Kirk's trusted inner circle. Jim, Bones, and Spock spent time together, but privately. Curiously, Kirk, Spock, and Bones shut Nurse Chapel, Lieutenant Uhura, and even Scotty out of their private revelries in Star Trek: the original series, despite what close friends they all are in Star Trek: Strange New Worlds. Captain Kirk radically changes the interpersonal dynamics of the Starship Enterprise. Captain Kirk missing out on most Spock, Uhura, Chapel, and Scotty's shared experiences in Star Trek: Strange New Worlds makes Jim an outsider, in retrospect. For instance, everyone but Kirk not only knows Chapel was engaged, but they met Dr. Roger Corby socially before Kirk met Corby in Star Trek: the original series. Similarly, Spock, Uhura, Chapel, and Scotty all know far more about the Gorn and had their own battles with the alien reptiles long before Kirk faced the Gorn captain in Star Trek: the original series, and they didn't share their information with their captain. Perhaps Kirk encouraged a separation between the captain and his crew, but they were all friendlier with each other under Captain Pike. Captain Kirk eventually brings new people aboard the USS Enterprise in Star Trek: the original series. Dr. M.C. Coy replaces Dr. Joseph Mabenga as Chief Medical Officer, and Lieutenant Erica Ortegas exits so that Lieutenant Hikaru Sulu takes over as helmsman. Lieutenant Commander Una Chin Riley also leaves the USS Enterprise when Captain Kirk takes over, with Commander Spock assuming the dual role of First Officer and Science Officer. All of those personnel changes create a very different Starship Enterprise bridge and overall environment under Captain Kirk, despite a number of crew members carrying over from Pike's command. Captain Kirk's command style is more assertive and insular than Captain Pike's more collaborative method, and perhaps this bled into how radically different his Enterprise became, despite so many of his crew being close friends for years. While no one can doubt Captain Kirk's effectiveness as captain of the Enterprise, in hindsight, a lot of the camaraderie in Star Trek Strange New Worlds seems to get lost, and, besides Spock, Kirk doesn't avail himself of the expertise of Pike's old crew that stayed with Jim as much as he could have. When James T. Kirk took command of the USS Enterprise, the galaxy itself seemed to take notice. His boldness, charisma, and unshakable instinct turned him into a living legend among Starfleet captains. But beneath the heroism and high-stakes adventures, Kirk's greatest strength, his fierce independence, may also have been his biggest disadvantage. Becoming the captain of the Enterprise gave Kirk the stars, but it also forced him to shoulder a burden that no human being could carry without cost. At first glance, Kirk's ascent to the captain's chair looks like destiny fulfilled. He was young, brilliant, and utterly fearless, a man whose tactical brilliance and moral courage made him the ideal symbol of Starfleet's optimism. But in becoming the captain, Kirk inherited not just command, but isolation. The higher one rises, the thinner the air becomes, and for Kirk, that isolation began the moment he gave his first order as captain. The price of command. In the world of Star Trek, starship captains are explorers, diplomats, and sometimes soldiers. Kirk excelled in all three roles, yet each demanded a different part of his humanity. As captain, he was expected to be rational, authoritative, and unyielding under pressure. But Kirk's defining trait, his deep emotional intuition, often clashed with those expectations. He didn't lead like a computer. He led with heart. That made him beloved by his crew, but it also meant that every casualty, every hard decision, tore at him in ways few could see. When Kirk took the center seat, he willingly stepped into a paradox. He was surrounded by his closest friends, Spock, McCoy, Scotty, yet he could never be truly equal to them. The chain of command created an invisible wall. His duty to lead meant he could never fully share the weight of command. McCoy could advise him. Spock could challenge him. But when it came time to decide whether to risk the Enterprise for one life or sacrifice one to save the many, Kirk stood alone. That solitude was the price of leadership, and Kirk paid it in silence. Emotional instinct versus logic. Kirk's other disadvantage came from within. His instinct to follow his emotions even when logic demanded restraint. It was a defining difference between him and his first officer, Spock. Spock's half-Vulcan discipline provided balance, but it also highlighted Kirk's Achilles' heel. He cared too much. This compassion was both his greatest strength and his greatest liability. When faced with a crisis, Kirk would risk everything, his ship, his rank, his life, to save even one crew member. He broke rules, bent orders, and defied protocol because in his mind, the human element mattered more than the letter of the law. Admirable? Yes. Sustainable? Not always. This impulsive empathy made Kirk a hero, but also exposed him to emotional burnout. No matter how many victories he won, the guilt of his losses never left him. The ghosts of fallen crew members haunted him in quiet moments, long after the stars outside his window stopped shimmering. Shadow of his own legend. As Kirk's reputation grew, so did the myths surrounding him. Starfleet cadets idolized him. His missions became Academy case studies. The Enterprise wasn't just a ship, it was Kirk's ship. But with fame came expectation, and that became another unseen disadvantage. Every time Kirk took the Enterprise into battle or ventured into uncharted space, he was not just fighting for survival. He was fighting to live up to the legend he had created. The danger of becoming a legend is that people stop seeing the person behind the myth. Kirk, the man, could doubt, hurt, and fail. But Kirk, the legend, could not. And when the two identities collided, the result was turmoil. We saw this most vividly in Star Trek II. The Wrath of Khan. Kirk's overconfidence, rooted in his belief that he could always find a way out, left him blindsided by Khan's vengeance. For the first time, the no-win scenario became real, and his myth nearly destroyed him. Becoming the captain meant Kirk could never truly fail, not in the eyes of Starfleet, not in the eyes of his crew, and certainly not in the eyes of himself. That pressure would break lesser men, but for Kirk, it became a quiet, ever-present companion, one that whispered doubts even as he smiled on the bridge. The disadvantage of time. There's another subtle disadvantage that Kirk's command brought. The loss of time for self-discovery, relationships, and peace. The captain's chair became both his throne and his cage. Every 5-year mission stretched him further from the simple joys of life. His romantic relationships faltered because duty always came first. The Enterprise became his only constant, the only love that didn't fade with time. The irony was profound. The man who could command hundreds, navigate wormholes, and outwit god-like beings could not maintain a single lasting connection off the bridge. Kirk's love for adventure left no room for a home. The more he gave to the stars, the less he had left for himself. By the time we meet an older Kirk in Star Trek, the motion picture, and later films, that disadvantage becomes painfully clear. He's restless in an admiral's uniform, nostalgic for the command chair he once called home, yet weary from the ghosts that came with it. His defining purpose, exploration, was also his addiction, one he could never fully let go of, even when it cost him his family, his peace, and eventually, his life. Leadership as sacrifice. Starfleet called Kirk a hero, but heroes rarely get to retire peacefully. In his final mission, Kirk once again sacrificed everything for others. It was fitting, almost poetic. The man who had lived his life in service to the stars ended it in their embrace. But even in that moment, you can see the reflection of his greatest disadvantage, his inability to stop being Captain Kirk. Command had become so entwined with his identity that without it, he didn't know who he was. Every decision, every risk, every act of defiance came from that unrelenting drive to lead and to protect. In the end, that made him extraordinary, but also deeply tragic. A flawed but eternal legacy. Kirk's disadvantage, his emotional impulsiveness, his isolation, his addiction to command, never overshadowed his greatness. Instead, they made him real. Unlike many captains who came after him, Kirk embodied the human heart of Star Trek. He wasn't perfect, and that was precisely why he was inspiring. He taught us that leadership isn't about being infallible. It's about caring enough to risk failure. It's about making the impossible choice, again and again, even when it hurts. Kirk's disadvantage wasn't truly a weakness. It was the cost of being fully human in a universe that often demanded something more. In giving himself to the Enterprise, Kirk gave up part of his humanity, but in doing so, he defined what it meant to be human in the first place. The stars may have taken much from him, but they also made him immortal. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and stay with us.